Welcome back, welcome back. One or two people listening out there. Hopefully you'll share with two other people. But anyway, this is Pastor Jeremy and Pastor Joseph. Um, Two weirdos in a box. If you're watching this on whatever it's on, or listening to it off of your phone, which I'm assuming is still the shape of a box or a square. But this is Anchored and Devoted. Thanks for listening in. Today, Jeremy's picked the topic, and we'll see how it works. There's two topics. So it might be two episodes, but it's justice and mercy. Justice and forgiveness.
Justice and forgiveness.
I've got mercy hiding under in my back pocket. So I'll let you get us started, sir. What was your reasoning for this topic or thinking behind it?
I think that there's an internal drive within each of us, and the drive that I've seen in our society, and I think worldwide, that is striving after justice. You can look at whether it's lowercase social justice or uppercase social justice movement, or a case to movements, the Innocence Project, movements to counteract injustices that have taken place in legal systems and systems of justice, of criminal justice reform, justice in economics, justice in commerce, justice in relationships between, say, parents and kids, or state and parents, or whatever relational dynamics there are. There is a very strong drive towards justice, and that makes me kind of wonder, where does this come from? But even before I ask where does this come from, the question I want to ask is, what does the idea of justice mean? When we say that we're looking for justice, we want to see justice done. What does that mean? Because my kids, I've got 4 young kids, and they can get pretty upset when I treat one differently than the other. There's ideas of equality, there's ideas of equity, there's ideas of fairness, there's ideas of rightness that all kind of get lumped together when we talk about justice. And so part of just the way my mind works, I want to ask, okay, what do you mean when you talk about justice? What is meant by the idea of justice? And does what I mean when I talk about justice, does it reflect what's meant more broadly when I'm walking down the street and someone's talking about wanting justice done? So I want to just kick that to you. When I talk about justice, what ideas come to mind? And maybe even as a first place, would you give me your definition of justice?
I'd say when we talk about justice, it varies from setting to setting, and that's hard. But it's real because definitions sadly vary from setting to setting. You can use the same word in a different setting and have a completely different meaning. When we talked about that Christianese type, of vocabulary versus regular vocabulary that you have within a family or a community, and within a cultural group, whether it be whatever it's based off of, and it could be work, or as bankers, or there's a number of ways that words can be used, and the definition is one that is linked or connected, but it does vary. So when I hear the word justice, you stated, I think like a little kid, just fairness. It doesn't mean that everything is equal, but it does mean that the other was thought of in light of the situation.
Okay.
And so justice often, whether you put social or criminal or whatever in front of it, is looking for me for some type of um, correctedness that needs to take place because there has been some error.
So there's an assumption then that something has gone wrong, and it needs to be remediated. It needs to be fixed.
And
Justice is taken to the place where it is fixed.
well, justice, when we take it, and we just had a conversation before this about humanism, when you have a people-centered justice where everything can't be known or seen, unlike God who does know and can see and is just, um, the goal is to try and bring as many of those individuals together to work
Mhm.
through this issue to come to a place where then justice can be had. So, um, something has occurred. Um, I mean, we have the court case going on now that's all over the news, um, dealing with Mr. Floyd's death and the family looking for justice, the communities, many
Yeah.
communities looking for justice. It's hard to do that when you don't have a God type of perspective. But God's made it clear as to
Why is that? Help me understand. Help
because
me understand that statement. Why we? Because it seems to me that every culture, regardless of whether or not they have a god in their background or a revealed scripture or some kind of ethical script that has been received and accepted by the culture, all cultures have some idea of justice, but it sounds like you're saying that without God, justice is at best a non-completable project
correct,
almost.
correct. There is an assumption when it comes to justice that everything will be on the table, and that isn't true.
Mm.
Humans come with their perspective as well as their desired um, view of the situation. And
Okay.
so they can either deceive themselves or they can share stuff that isn't relative to the situation itself because of how they feel about it. So you've got two things occurring, whether it's a deception of self or a feeling, and then to shift from that is truth being shared? Like, is all the truth being shared? Two people have an accident, you get completely two different things. If two people stand on the side of the street, you still have to know four different stories about the exact same thing until someone pulls out a camera and says, "Hey, we can just watch it," and there isn't the humanness of it. It's just here's what happened. Um, you've taken out the drama of what took place before as well as what took place after. Here's what took place in that intersection. Here is the truth. Truth is what's required for justice. And to ask for truth from people that are broken is hard because often truth is uncomfortable. It's very um, uh, um, in your face, it's very factual, there's no bending it. And so um, humans, um,
You sound like a conservative, Dave.
oh.
You sound like a modernist, not a postmodernist.
I'm just being honest. When you have Christ in your life, then you can share the truth, but it's done in love. And
Mm.
that's one of those things where I was going to ask you about justice and mercy, because when we talk about justice, for me, the love has to be attached to the truth. It can't just sit by itself because then no one can handle it. Like you share the truth, this is what is, but then how does that work with the justice part? Like, there has to be love for justice to be had. um it you can't have one without the other. I know for many, justice requires um being able to address their feelings, and
So yeah, so I want to camp out on that because I think that's the milieu in which we are right now.
hmm
You're talking about truth, but a very simple response to that is, I am giving you the truth. I'm giving you my truth,
hmm
and we have from almost every quarter encouragement not only to live our truth but to express our truth
hmm
and to stand in our truth, and that your truth should have no bearing on my truth.
and that's not possible if it's actual truth. Like, it's just not possible for you to live out your truths and someone else live out their truths without truth, if it is real, conflicting. It
Okay,
just doesn't fit.
serious question though. Serious question.
Mhm.
You're saying that as a big, beautiful black man.
Hmm.
I'm going to ask you, as a stubby white man,
You're not stubby.
aren't you just parroting a paradigm that's been put in place by my culture to keep your culture down?
No, I'm sharing God definition of truth. It has nothing to do with me or you, my skin, your skin, and Jesus didn't match either one of us, just for the record. Um, and God is infinite, who created all mankind. So it's not one of those things where I view it as this is like when I worked with the Aboriginals up in northern Canada, the white man's God. No, he is the God, the only God. And so he has defined and created truth to be something that is um, foundational. It's not movable. It's not um, based off of my perception, my perspective. And the interesting
Right.
thing in the rest of our life, um, truth isn't like that. If I say there's a house and you say there's a house, we can call it different things, but we both recognize it as a structure because it's a truth. Like it's there. Like you can call it a hut and I can call it a house. Fine, we can give different names to it, but it's still truth that it exists. It's there. There's no saying no, that's a lake. Let's go swim in it. No, it might be a lake behind the house, but those are two different things we're talking about. Why? Because the truth is there is something there.
Mhm.
There is something factually there. When it comes to justice, there is something factually there that we have to wrestle with. The loss of a life, the, you know, whatever it is that occurred, that is the truth. And then from there, we have to move to, okay, now how do we reconcile that with love so that justice actually takes place? Because there isn't in the cases that we've been talking about from people that have passed in the recent
Yeah.
past, there isn't a dollar amount that is worth a life, right?
Right.
Like, so we
Right.
deal with the loss, recognizing that no amount of paper is going to replace the life of a woman who was asleep in her own house in her own bed who was shot by the police. Like, there's no amount of
Right.
paper that covers that or makes that right. The goal there is to uh, um, make it so that this doesn't happen again, and the goal is to figure out ways to make that happen. And one of them is with um, in this case, a a penalty, um, a transaction occurring that allows for those involved to have to pause now before taking action in relationship to other people.
Mhm.
Every police officer, I'm sure, on the force, whether it be in Atlanta, Florida, wherever, is now pausing because of the cost of not being cautious with the lives of others. Uh, but understand there's also the impact on the family. Yes, they've received a large settlement, but that now has to be lived out for generations
Yeah.
to care for the loss. The future of um, Mr. Floyd is unknown. I don't know what he would have done musically or mathematically or
Right.
socially or even with, the generations behind him. Like, you just don't know what was lost. So there isn't this um, one for one type of.
It's not an easy calculus.
No, it's not. And
Uh,
even biblically, there was never, when we look at justice in the Bible, we don't see an easy calculus there.
right.
You have someone who lost their life, and God makes it clear in the Old Testament it was an accident. You need to flee to a city that is one where you are safe. The
Mhm.
family can take your life with the understanding, just get lost or come out of that city. but but the goal isn't to say that this person's life is of the same value as yours. Like, that isn't the exchange. Especially when we look at Cain and Abel. Like, we're not saying that at all. That God is just and was in that situation. That um, uh, uh, Cain's life should have been taken in that moment to make it equal. Like, that's
Right.
that's not what's occurring there.
Right.
What do you think of when you think of justice?
A lot of the things that you have been touching on. Um, I think that there's a connection, there's a necessary rootedness between justice and truth. As you said, truth can't be only subjective. It has to also be objective. The very concepts that we're talking about have to be rooted to real objects, not just linguistic,
Mhm.
um, artifacts, if you will. But when I think of justice, I real simple. I think of rightness.
Mhm.
Justice is when what is right is what is done.
Mhm.
And that's kind of a continuum because justice cannot be fully satisfied by the unjust.
Correct.
And I, as a parent, love my kids. I want the best for all of my kids. When I mediate between arguments that they have, when I have to discipline, um, you know, one of my kids this morning was roaring at one of my other kids, and the kid that was being roared at reached out and scraped or clawed at
Oh, no.
kid number roarer. And I've got to step in. I have to determine what's appropriate here because what was right wasn't met by either. The standard of rightness wasn't met by either party here, and I, as the judge, have to determine how far from right they individually were.
Mhm.
The interaction between what was done by the one's lack of rightness to impede or to progress the not rightness of the other one. And then I've got to determine what am I going to impose now to bring this situation back into rightness. And the fact is, even if even if I could do all of that, even if I could calculate all of those steps, there's still the problem of me.
Mhm.
I bring to this situation my own baggage,
Mhm.
my own limitations, the fact that I didn't see everything that happened, the
Correct.
fact that I haven't had my coffee yet, whatever it might be, I'm imperfect.
Correct.
I'm not right. And
Correct.
because I'm not right, I cannot rightly carry out rightness. And so to reach justice,
Mhm.
to have justice, you have to have someone who is in fact just, which is again why I'm going to tie this right back to the God of the Bible, because
Mhm.
Paul in Romans was really clear that God was just
Yep. And
in sending his son and the justifier of all those who believe, because only a God who is just can bring about justice. And so I can look at miscarriages of criminal justice
mhm.
throughout history.
Mhm.
And the comfort that I have is that specifically in the American criminal justice system was built on the dictum, the foundational principle that final justice, ultimate justice cannot be mediated here on earth, regardless of how good the justice system is.
Correct.
Ultimately, we are all going to answer to God, who will justly judge all of us. Um, when I talk about justice, when I see people pursuing justice, that's what I see them actually pursuing, regardless of how they want to talk about it, regardless of how they may want to, tie different concepts together that I don't think actually can be tied together or that
Mhm.
are not dependent on each other. What I see is a very real internal drive to pursue God's justice because we are made in his image,
Mhm.
because we have that resonance of there is truth, there is a right and there is a wrong. We intrinsically know it.
Mhm.
We intrinsically want to have that, to live in a world that is ordered rightly,
And
regardless of what culture we come from or what our experiences have been.
I think it's funny. It doesn't matter whether you're liberal or conservative. You still want to be able to go to your home and go to bed.
Hmm.
Like you want things to be
For
where you
sure.
left them when you you went to do whatever during the day. Like there's this expectation of what's yours, and if someone messes with it, you have a problem with it. Little kids get it, big kids get it.
Yep.
Um, that goes to what God has put in our heart. Now we can harden that by trying to condition it for other things
For
and
sure.
trying to, make it seem as though we don't care. But the reality is, you do. I
Hmm.
mean, the tough part is knowing that, like like for Breonna Taylor or for many of the other people that have passed recently, you can have a camera, you can have the factual thing, and
Yep,
because people are broken, you still can't get to that place
that's
um,
absolutely
of
correct.
of a human version of justice, as you said, a human version of rightness. Psalms makes it clear over and over again that righteousness, this rightness, this justice that we are to do, is one where we are putting the other before ourselves. I mean, Jesus made it clear with the greatest commandment: love God first with your heart, mind, and soul, everything, your head, heart, and soul, like every part of you, all of it. And then, second, and like unto it, we ought to love others like we love ourselves, and everybody loves themselves. So when it comes to justice, I have to be willing to put myself in their shoes, the grieved party, right? As well
Hmm.
as the party that is um, has done the wrongdoing. I have to do both, and that's where God comes in. Often we as people look at justice as that other person is the wicked one, period. But when we look at the Old Testament and we see that, you accidentally kill someone and you run to the city, you are given
Yep,
this space to work this out. That there are those leaders at the gate who could intercede on your behalf to try and work things out. That it wasn't
right.
just your life is doomed, there is no more hope for you. No, justice can still be carried out and there be grace and mercy and love. Like I know it's hard, especially when justice seems to have lost its place.
Hmm.
But who we are called to be hasn't changed because culture's changed.
You made me think of something um, that I thought was really interesting just now. You said that in order to carry out justice, you have to be able to put yourself into the shoes of the person, the grieved party, as well as the party that did the wrong.
Hmm.
Um, that really stands against the idea that justice is blind. We
Hmm.
picture this
Hmm.
statue, this image of justice, a woman with a blindfold, scales, and a sword. And we get the scales. We're figuring out how to make things equal. The sword's there for punishment, but the blindfold is there so that justice is blind. And what you're saying is justice can't be blind.
No, not at all.
Justice has to be eyes wide open. And a, I think that's a great demonstration of what we said a few minutes ago, and that justice ultimately has not only its source, but its completion in God, who is not blind at all, but who has seen every single moment of every single situation from every single perspective for all time. Therefore, he knows precisely what is right.
Correct.
Our justice must be blind, not because we ought to be unaware, but I think blindness would better be described as non preferential. Justice must not show preference
Mm,
to the parties.
correct.
Justice must approach both parties saying, I'm going to look at your situation, and then I'm going to look at your situation, and I'm going to do my best, whether it's to identify or to empathize, however you want to describe it. It is to see through the eyes of the person what happened to determine what is right and what is wrong.
Hmm.
And again, Proverbs 15:3, the eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping
Hmm.
watch on the evil and the good. Justice is not blind. Now, we also say, this is where it got interesting for me. We also say love is blind,
Yeah, I think
which
that's
is
wrong.
not a First Corinthians thing.
That's
Okay.
wrong. Hold on, but before we go there, I do want to pause and say something. When
Yeah.
Jesus went to the cross, he knew what he was doing, and God, is just, is going to extend mercy and grace on the cross by taking on the sin of all of mankind for eternity, not just for you and me in this moment, but for our great grandparents and
Wow.
every grandchild to come. Like when you think of that, when it comes to justice, in his time on earth, being born, putting on flesh, like stepping out of all of eternity into time, put like the infinite becoming finite. Like this is crazy. And so when it comes to justice, that's my model. That's what I look. for the love, the truth. Like he was not
Yeah.
blind to the fact that
Hmm.
every sin
Hmm.
I would do, he's dying for. And at the same time, he extended mercy there. Instead of, just saying, yeah, I died for your sins and now you got to worship me. He says, no, I made you family.
Mm.
Like, no, I'm going to give you a purpose. Like,
Well,
and so when I look at people that are in prison for stupid stuff as well as for crazy stuff, I go, where does, yes, I get the justice part as far as the world's definition, but where is that space so that people can live out their purpose, live out a calling that is bigger than the mistake that they made? I'm not for freeing everyone and being silly. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm also not for, three strikes and you're forever banished at 17. Like, and you never see the, sun again until you're 100 years old. Like that just really seems wrong when you consider this is the beginning of life that sets the pace for all of eternity. Like that,
yeah.
this
Yeah.
is
And
an
again,
eternal
that
being.
that that is not blind.
No, it's not.
When you set an ordinance in place like that, that is not blind. That's a definition of preferential. I'm
Yes,
going to prefer those who get caught fewer times
correct.
to those who get caught more.
Correct.
It's, it's,